Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. You're watching In Deep on the Delta. This is the weekly fishing report for the week of July 28th. And I need to start off with a sad note today. I want to say a few words about the passing of legendary bass angler D. Thomas. I learned of his passing last week a little too late to get on the report, so I really feel I'd like to say a few words about D. And I have not been a lifelong friend of Dee's. I knew about Dee in high school, and I had the opportunity to talk with him a few times over the years. But the last year or so, I got to know Dee fairly well, and I consider Dee a friend. And I've got to sit down with him and talk to him on several occasions. And you know, his stories are incredible, and he's just led an incredible life. And what stands out to me with Dee, I mean, he's been there from the start of really, you know, tournament bass fishing, going from just a few guys at the dock making some you know, betting lunch, or all the way to what it is today, you know, multi-million-dollar industry. So that in itself is incredible. But what you really think about when you think about Dee is a guy that has contributed something to the sport that changed the way people play the game. And that's what Dee did when he basically refined the flipping technique. So that's what makes a legend. Dee is a legend. He will never be forgotten, and just an incredible life. And with that being said, I can say that Dee, even at 85 years old with all of his ailments, he was still out fishing, and whatever it took to get him in the boat and get him out of the boat, he just loved the game. He had the passion and desire to be out there, and that's incredible. I don't know how long he had fished, probably 50, 60 years, but he still had that desire. So when you guys are out fishing the Delta, and maybe you're doing a little punching or flipping, you catch a fish, every now and then think about Dee, and I can guarantee you that his spirit and his soul are going to be somewhere on the Delta forever and ever. So Dee, rest in peace, and we all thank you for the contributions that you have given to the bass fishing world. So thanks a lot, Dee. With that, we'll get right into the report, and it dropped a little bit this week. It's not as good as it was last week. People are still catching fish, but we can kind of expect that from having, you know, a full moon phase that dropped out, tidal coefficients up in the 90s. Now it's dropped down to around the 50s, and you know, with the slower tides, the fish just aren't as active. Now, water conditions out on the Delta are, you know, they're perfect. Central Delta, we're talking 83, 84 degree water temps through the middle of the day. I talked to Alan Fong. The temperatures out around Liberty and the Sacramento, they're inching up. They're not quite into the 80s, but they're 78 degrees. Everything is pretty much normal. Water clarity is about 5 feet throughout the Delta. People are catching stripers still. Not a lot going on, but if you're out around Liberty or the Sac side, they're doing pretty well. Don't know why they're still here with the water temperatures the way they are. And they're also catching a few on the Delta, the Central Delta. The guys that I know that fish year round, they're still going out and catching some fish. With that being said, before I get into the report, there's a couple high notes, things that I'm really looking forward to. Number one, just seems to be a biomass of shad in the Delta, and that's going to bode well for the fishing this fall. If we have that you know, those big numbers of shad, when the water temperature starts to drop and the fish start chasing bait off the bank, man, the jerkbait fishing and paddle-tail swim bait fishing should be just great for both stripers and largemouth. So I don't know why there's so many bass in there, or so many shad, but boy, they're out there, and we can't complain about that. There's also a ton of new fry out there. So the spawning that's been going on, not February, March, April, May, but June and July, there's still some really productive spawning going on. I talked to Ted, who has been fishing around Lads, and he's also seen just what he called a biomass of fry all over the Calaveras and in certain areas, you know, throughout the Delta. So all good stuff. Now to the reports, not great. I talked to Rob Cloutier from the Bass Hole, and Rob fished that New Gen tournament. It was kind of an odd deal where I think there were 40 guys, and they fished against each other and eliminated everyone till they got down to the final two for the big paycheck. Rob made it all the way to the final, well, not the final two, but he made it one step away from the final two bass fishermen. I think he was only less than an ounce. I think it was a tenth of an ounce or something, and Rob would have been fishing for that big money. But I congratulate Rob in that tournament field. Very good fisherman, and just to make it that far, it deserves a big hand for Rob. Rob said he was catching his fish punching, drop shotting, and worming. So with that being said, that's something you might want to try if you go out this next weekend. Oakley Williams won the tournament, and man, that guy is hot. I think the last 2 or 3 months he has won 4 or 5 tournaments out there. So congratulations to Oakley, and also congratulations to Rob. Okay, before I get into what I've been doing, I want to read a couple of reports that I got from folks that have been sending in reports. And I will say that I was out Sunday and I counted 75 trailers at Paradise Point. Ton of people out this weekend. I was expecting to get a ton of reports, but they just didn't come through. And I knew after Sunday night, Monday, with the reports being on the low side, that people weren't catching fish. So that was kind of an indicator to me that things were pretty tough. Anyhow, I want to talk about the report Robert gave. And he started off with topwaters. They were very slow. He caught nothing on poppers. About 9 o'clock in the morning, he got some fish on a whopper plopper. And then his key for success was fishing Cincos and drop shot. And he had said that in a 300-yard section of bank, they caught about 25 or 30 fish. And that was a key. But his real key, and he was fishing drop shot and Cincos on the outside edge. He wasn't fishing in the trough, he was fishing on the outside. But his real key was fishing the active lunar period. So when that moon was rising and dropping during the day, that's when he was catching the fish. And I think a lot of people don't think about that as much as they should. And that might be something you want to put on your list. Check out the lunar tables, and when you have those lunar phases that are changing, you want to be fishing, even if it's around lunchtime when you might be thinking of taking a break. If there's a moonfall or moonrise, say at noontime, you want to fish through that and be on your best behavior. So that was Robert's report. Let's talk about KG. He went out. He usually gives me reports every week. Well, he gave me a report, but his report was from Tahoe. He just went up there and got out of the heat and caught some Mackinaw. So KG, that might be a good thing to do. Anyhow, what I found this week was my morning and evening, the change of light bite had really dropped off. Still getting a few fish, but the numbers are way down and the big fish just aren't coming out. I've been getting a lot of blow-ups on frogs, but they're not committing to the frogs this week. And that has been a pattern that several people that I've talked to at the dock and several of the reports said, I'm getting bites on frogs, are coming up hitting them, but they're not eating them. So the hookup rate has been very, very poor on frogs. Now, I would imagine when that tide starts moving a little faster, those fish are going to get active. So frogging is still paying off with the bites, just not getting a lot of hookups. People are also catching fish in shade pockets. Since we started talking about shade pockets, it seems like everybody is fishing them, and they're throwing worms and drop shots into shade pockets. If you can find docks, you're probably also going to catch some fish. So that would be another pattern. A lot of people are still catching fish on crankbaits and chatterbaits. Matter of fact, I had, I'll read another report to you that I got from, who was this from? Got a report from Anthony, and he was getting fish cranking at high tide and low tide. He's been going to chatterbaits and then wacky worm in the shade when those bites fall out, which kind of falls in line what we've been saying, and that's kind of a standard report this week. But anyhow, that is the report. If you're coming out this weekend, the tide should be better. Make sure you take into consideration lunar phases, Obviously the tide, a high outgoing tide, has been the best tide the last week. And switch it up. If you get a few fish on a bank with cranks or chatterbaits, you might want to turn around and go over that same bank with a slower moving bait like a worm. You might pick up a few more fish. So take all that into consideration. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you subscribe. Make sure you hit the like button. And until next week, we'll see you on the water.